Welcome to the presentation of a lecture from Gnostic Radio, a free public service from the Gnostic tradition of Samael en Vior. Gnosis is the root wisdom of all the world's great religions. Gnosis is a universal teaching of practical science, whose goal is absolute liberation from suffering and the complete development of the human being. This lecture is one of many available by free download or podcast. The hundreds of hours of lectures range in topic and complexity in order to address the many needs of humanity. Each Saturday, Gnostic Radio broadcasts live. The live lecture is accompanied by an online chat, allowing listeners to read additional explanations related to the lecture and providing an opportunity to ask questions of the speaker. To learn how to participate or tune into our continuous web broadcast, visit our website for more information at gnosticradio.org. Gnostic Radio is made possible by the financial support of listeners like you. For more information or to make a donation, visit our website at gnosticradio.org. Now, with heartfelt wishes for the end of suffering for all creatures, we begin the lecture. May all beings be happy.
We are in a time of war, and I'm not talking about war physically as much, such as a war with soldiers on a battlefield with guns, tanks, and bombs. Although those types of wars are definitely a symptom of the war that I'm referring to. The real war that we are engaged in is psychological and spiritual. And I'm not so much referring to that psychological and spiritual war that's being waged in our media, in our communities, in our cities, and our families. But the root of all the wars is the real war that's happening in our minds. That's happening inside of each of us as individuals, psychologically, spiritually. The Gnostic teachings explain throughout all ancient philosophies and religions that whatever is happening to us physically, terrestrially, in our external circumstances, is happening because of our internal state, because of our internal circumstances. In other words, our physical life is a reflection of our interior life. What we experience around us is drawn to us by what we are inside. This might sound surprising to you if you've not studied the Gnostic philosophies, whether we call them Buddhist or Christian or Kabbalistic. This concept or this explanation of our existence is universal and is very powerful. But it contradicts much of what we can, in these contemporary times, believe about life. We have this belief that by changing our external circumstances, we can change our internal state. And in spite of all the evidence that is stacked against us, we persist in this mistaken belief. Always trying to achieve external goals, accomplishments, acquisitions, in order to find happiness inside. And we always fail. And we keep trying, and we always fail. And because of that, we're in a state of war. A war inside. A war inside of us between that longing for happiness against all of our desires. It is our desires and our mistaken notion of self-identity that causes this conflict. We have the mistaken notion in a mistaken sense of self. A sense of self that has been built on memories, traumas, concepts, beliefs, attachments, all kinds of theories. Our particular individual birthplace and language and culture, and schools and groups and education and family history, flags, countries, religions, all of these things that we think make our identity. And in order to support that notion, we seek all kinds of external confirmations of it and supports for it. To be accepted by groups, to be admired and loved by others, to be envied. We love to feel envied. We love to feel feared. We love to intimidate others. We love to have what others don't. And we want what others have. And all of these desires stem from a central core inner conflict, which is this misunderstanding of the nature of reality, the misunderstanding of the nature of self. So we are in a state of war. The external wars that are waged on this planet, whether with guns or with media, whether with religious concepts or economic battles, all of these wars stem from the internal conflict that each of us has within. The conflict between our real being and the false one. Our real being, what we call our innermost, is at war with our ego. But we've made a grave mistake. We've chosen the side of the ego. And we persist in that choice as we persist in choosing to feed our ego and to support it and to fortify it and to give it energy and to listen to it. And we ignore the voice of our innermost. And that is proven by our suffering, by our loneliness, by our inability to change the fundamental problems in our lives, by the unavoidable circumstances that emerge from day to day. You see, we are attracted to spirituality, to the occult, to mysticism, to powers, to meditation, kundalini, to magic, to Kabbalah, because we want power. We want the power to change our circumstances. We want the power to acquire happiness. As whatever our ideas of happiness happen to be. This is why we are attracted to these things. But unfortunately, we are attracted to these things through desire. Even though our innermost, our being, our inner God is pushing us to change spiritually, to come back to our true nature, the ego interferes and takes over and takes advantage and takes us away from the real path and convinces us that we're on the right one. So this battle is very serious. The collateral damage is happening everywhere in our world right now. The way that we're destroying our planet, the way that we are destroying each other, the way all of our countries are in a continual state of conflict, the way the people in power are taking advantage of the people who are not. All of that stems from this inner conflict that each of us has within. It is the ego who makes a mess of everything, because the ego is a mess. Our ego is a mess of conflicting desires, a huge aggregate of conflicting wills, different desires that fight amongst each other to take control of us, of our machine. And in the midst of it all is our being, our innermost, who is attempting to guide us, to aid us, to help us, but we don't listen to that voice. We don't like what that voice has to say. And that voice advises us to cease and desist from a harmful action, to not criticize that other person, to not gossip, to not complain, to be patient, to be kind. Our ego says, oh no, I deserve to act, to criticize, to use my tongue, to get what I desire. And we listen to the desires. And so we end in conflict. And those conflicts spill out into our lives. And they affect our loved ones. They affect our coworkers. They affect our jobs. They affect our communities. And by simple mathematical analysis, we can see that is why the world is in the state that it's in. Because all the individual components of society are in this state of internal conflict, unable to listen to the wise voice that knows the right path, that knows the way to live in harmony with nature and the law, and to bring happiness to oneself and to others. For several thousand years now, we've had a lot of advice given to us about how to avoid a worsening of this conflict. And this advice has come in many forms: religions, philosophies, sciences, arts. And occasionally we get enamored with them and we like them and we call them religions, or we call them ethics or philosophy or mystery schools. But in the end, our desires always win, and those schools are corrupted, degenerated, and die. The religions are corrupted, degenerated, and die. But still, the attempt is made to help us. Unfortunately, throughout all of these centuries, the consequences of our wrong actions act much like compound interest. They work on an exponential scale. Because as we've studied with karmic laws, the consequences of an action are greater than the original action. This is the basic law of karma. One action spreads out, creates an effect, and it aggregates with the other effects and other actions, and they build upon each other. And that's why we see our society moving so rapidly, like a cart barreling down a hill, and no one seems to know how to take control of it or change its direction. And this is why we see every single area of our society collapsing. We can't name a single aspect of our life that is truly getting better. Now, most of us would immediately think, but technology is getting better. But you need to think through that and analyze it more carefully. Every technology comes at a price and always has consequences. There have been some benefits, we don't deny this. But at what price? At what cost? When the fax machine came out, everybody thought, this is going to make everything better. And then when FedEx came around, everybody thought, it's going to make everything better. And then when the internet came, everybody thought, it's going to make everything better. But every time, it only makes things more complicated and puts more of a burden on us to work more, to work harder, to work longer for less. Isn't it true? No one can deny that. And yet we're still mystified, hypnotized by technology. The rate of change the speed and intensity of our problems are growing. They are not lessening. Our politics are not getting better. Our economics are not getting better. Our social systems are not improving. Our families are not getting stronger. Our societies are not getting stronger. Our agriculture is not getting better. Our water supplies are not getting better. Our air is not getting better. Nothing. Our religions aren't getting better. Where is something getting better? Where do we find an improvement on this planet? We cannot find it. None of us like to admit this. We don't like to see it. And when I talk about these things, what does it bring up in your heart? Fear? Anxiety? Worry? Why? The one who has faith in God, the one who knows God, the one who is connected to God, does not fear. So, before your eyes, we have the evidence. Are we connected with God or not? Are we guided by our innermost or not? Are we reflections of God here in this world or not? I know each group claims to be the chosen group. Each religion claims to be the chosen people, claims to be blessed by God and chosen to be the initiators of the golden age. And there are Buddhists who think that of themselves, and there are Christians who think that of themselves, and there are Jews who think that, and Gnostics who think that. But where is the evidence? Where is it? Are these groups truly, are these individuals truly reflections of God? Do they reflect the virtues of God? The virtues of the divine? Do they truly, spontaneously, intuitively act like Buddhas? Are they truly improving society or bringing more conflict? These are the questions we have to ask ourselves about our own spirituality. To get at the root, the heart of this conflict, this battle. You see, the war that we're fighting is a war against ourselves. The real war. We get distracted by external circumstances and think we are David fighting Goliath. And we think Goliath is society. We think Goliath is the established religions. Or that Goliath is the Illuminati or the Great Conspiracy. We think Goliath is government. We think Goliath is the Pope or some religious leader. We think Goliath is anything outside of ourselves, but we never realize that Goliath is ourselves, our own mind. David is also ourselves. But David, if you know the story, is just a boy, a child, innocent, weak, and without any protection. no armor, no training, no experience. The only thing that David has is faith. He has faith, and he has a sling, and a stone, and a staff. David, of course, is a symbol who represents an aspect of our consciousness in a given stage of development in the process of initiation, the development of the soul. David is a state or a level of development that we can reach. But to reach that, we first have to be Saul, who was king before David. That's not the purpose of today's lecture, to talk about those stages of initiation. What we're here to talk about is, how did David do it? How do we learn from David, and what can we do to imitate this example, to learn from it? Goliath is this giant who seems all-powerful, who seems to have absolute dominance of the battlefield. This is the case when we look into our mind. Goliath is our mind. Goliath is our sense of self. It is who we think we are. Goliath is very strong and very confident. Whatever our own sense of self is, whether that sense of self is we feel ourselves to be a good person, we feel ourselves to be smart, to be giving, to be clever, to have insight into this and that, to have certain skills, to have certain problems, maybe. All of those aspects and characteristics of our inner sense of who we are, that is Goliath. But it has your name. It has your own name. When you discover real spirituality, when you really become sick and tired of suffering, when you really taste the bitterness of life and you're done with it, and you want to be done with it, you want to change, then David starts to emerge in you. The potential to become David. David represents, in synthesis, our consciousness. What we call essence. What in Buddhism is called Buddhata or Buddhadhatu or Tathagatagarbha. And this is the embryo of the soul. In us, we only have 3% of it free from the clutches of Goliath. 3% more or less. So when we look at the story of David and Goliath and we see Goliath at the head of an army, Goliath is like our chief feature. And the army is all the egos within us. And David is that free consciousness. But in us, David's asleep. We're not David yet. We haven't conquered Goliath. Our David hasn't even woken up yet. Our David is just a babe. And to reach this stage, to confront and overcome Goliath, is a huge triumph. It doesn't come easily. Don't think that just by discovering a teaching or reading a few books or becoming a fan of a teacher or a book or a teacher or a movement that you'll all of a sudden become David and overcome your ego. It doesn't work like that. This type of change is deeply painful. and very difficult to accomplish. It requires that you confront the deepest, most painful, most shameful parts of your mind. It isn't pleasant, and it isn't fun, and it isn't something to boast about or be proud of. It is something that is our duty to do. When you have a duty, it must be done. It isn't something to go talking about, telling everybody, oh, I did this and that. Look how great I am. When you take out the trash, do you go boasting to your friends? Hey, I took out the trash today. Don't you want to admire me? The ego is trash. Our sense of self is a lie. It is a beast. It is a minotaur, which is the same story as David and Goliath. To confront that, to fight that, we have to first start by awakening this essence, by learning about this in ourselves and working with it, not in the future, right now. Be cognizant. Pay attention. Be here and now. Be awake. Be in charge of your psychological temple, in yourself. And watch that Goliath as he mocks you, as he laughs at you, because he will. And he will use every circumstance that he can to make you go back to sleep. This is the battle. He will work through your spouse, through your friends, through your fellow students, through your coworkers, to make you feel foolish and weak and ashamed and a weakling and like you can never beat him. It's up to you to decide if you believe him or not. And the evidence will be shown in your day-to-day life. This is what Gnosis is about. Gnosis is about awakening that essence, training it, so that one day you can become David. So that one day you will have the courage to step onto the battlefield of your own mind and to confront your own Goliath and to kill him. But don't think you're going to go charging out on the battlefield like Achilles or some great hero, that everyone will applaud you and cheer you on, and that you will look very heroic and beautiful and great. You won't. You're going to look like a fool. You're going to look like David. A weakling, without any protection, without any training, and everyone will mock you. Everyone in your mind, everyone in your environment. This is a universal truth, a cosmic truth. It's eternal. It's part of the path. So Gnosis is about training us for that. In that sense, we can easily summarize Gnosis, this ancient tradition, as a military training. It is. But not a military training with the body, to work in the external environment, to conquer others, to conquer other schools, to build a big movement or a big army. No. It is a training of your consciousness, to conquer your mind. It is very rigorous, and very few can take it. In ancient times, this training was given very slowly, with very gradual steps, over the course of lifetimes, not in one life. It was exceedingly rare for anyone to take all the trainings in one life. In most cases, people would take multiple existences to receive the full training. And this is why we see in all our traditional mystical schools and religious traditions what we can call a graded path, or stages to the path. In Tibetan Buddhism, they call this lamrim. It was taught by the Buddha Shakyamuni. It was taught by Guru Rinpoche or Padmasambhava, and it was organized by Tsongkhapa and presented in an organized fashion. But that same teaching exists in every religion. Different terms, same concept. A teaching that was built on graded paths, or what the Tibetans in Sanskrit are called yanas. More or less like rungs on a ladder. The beginning stages are always the same in every religion. Ethics. What to do, what not to do. This is work with psychology. To work to change one's actions in one's mind, so that by being good in the mind, by acting correctly in your mind, then your external circumstances become a reflection of that. Gradually, over a long period of time, and as the student proved themselves, actualized the teachings, were living the teachings, they would be given higher and higher degrees of training, until eventually they were introduced to more rigorous tools. The highest levels of these tools are called Tantra. In the West, it was called alchemy. It is a system of transmutation. To transmute is to change from one thing to another. Trans means across. Mutate or mutation is related to form or change. So in synthesis, transmute or transmutation refers to changing one thing into another thing. That's alchemy. Right? We all know alchemy was about changing lead into gold, but not physical lead. The lead of the ego. The lead in our psyche. That lead that holds us down in hell has to be radically changed. And that was why the beginning steps were always psychological. To begin working on that, to understand that concept, to begin doing it. And the main thing was to awaken the essence, to awaken consciousness. First and foremost, required. If someone was not able to do it, they weren't given more teachings, because it would be harmful to them. People nowadays think, why are all the teachings secret? Why do they not give it to everybody? Because we are asleep, because we are animals, and because we are self-destructive. No parent will give their child a weapon when that child is immature. Likewise, a responsible teacher will not give the student something that will hurt them. The science of transmutation and the higher forms related with Tantra are based upon the transmutation that occurs in the lower forms in psychology. This was always the prerequisite. To learn how to transmute the mind, to transform the mind, to change it to something better, to make it more in harmony with nature and the law of karma. And these teachings were hidden in every tradition, in every mystical school. How to perform this transmutation, how to change from one state to another state. Throughout this entire development, through our written history, through our oral history, we've passed through many stages of this process, of this information being given out. But we've reached the end. As I mentioned, that scale, that exponential scale of change, is reaching a level of unsustainability. This is very evident everywhere we look in our society now. The energy is tearing us apart. Our psychological energy, which is karma, is shaking us to pieces. No one can deny that. In our society, we see it everywhere. Very few families are even able to stay together because the psychological environment of families is becoming too intense from generation to generation. Families are splitting. It's rare now to find a family that still is connected and close. It's very easy to find fractured families. The same is true of every other social structure. Moreover, the energy is so powerful, it's shaking the planet. Scientists don't like to admit it, but the record shows that the earthquakes are increasing. Volcanic activity is increasing. Problems in nature are increasing. Problems that are beyond our control. The evidence is there. We don't like to see the cause or admit the cause, but we are the cause. And because of that, the protectors of the knowledge, those who have achieved the knowledge, who have actualized it, who have awakened, opened the doors to us. They said, there's no more time. Soon, this planet will shake itself apart. This civilization, this culture, will consume itself. We have been on the brink of it for decades. Never before in our history has it been possible for one person to get into a room and push a button and end the world. It's like that now. We like to think we're safe and that all those buttons are locked away. But we can't even keep a guy from, doing these different terrorist acts that are happening all over the place. What if one of those guards became a terrorist? What if one of those guards went crazy? What if the president went crazy? There are no guarantees. It's terrifying, but it's a fact. And that fact is a reflection of our psychology. We built this. God didn't build this. We did. We made this. And we can't seem to fix it. So the masters of the White Brotherhood, the White Lodge, the Gnostic Church, whatever name you want to put to the hierarchy of real human beings, said, okay, here it is. This is the teaching. This is the whole thing. If you want it, use it. If you want to change the situation, if you want to change yourself, now's your chance. Use it while you can. So for the last few decades, this knowledge has been percolating through humanity. And the one that's responsible for that is the one who bears responsibility for this age of development. You see, this humanity on this planet right now is the fifth race. We think we're the only one, but really we are the fifth. The four before us also went through their cycles, being born, raising up, having a civilization for a long time, then decaying and going away, transmuting into something else. Previous to us was the Atlantean age. And previous to them was the Lemurian age. And previous to that was the Polar age. Or the Hyperborean age. And then previous to that was the Polar. So we are the fifth. We are the worst. This fifth race bears the name Aryan. Now some have taken that name and corrupted it. specifically some mistaken occultists in the last century, took that name Aryan and interpreted it to mean white people. It doesn't mean that. The word Aryan comes from Aries. The word Aryan comes from the Greek god Ares. Ares is the name of a celestial force. A force that exists beyond any particular culture or religion. In other words, Ares is a Greek word, but the force Ares is not Greek. That same force is also known in the Hebrew tradition as Samael. The archangel Samael is the fifth of the 7 archangels mentioned in the Bible. The archangel Samael is the 5th angel in the line of succession of angels who've been guiding humanity. So this current race is under the guidance, is the responsibility of the angel Samael. And that's why in our mythologies, in all of our great traditions, there's a lot of talk about the serpent. Because Samael is related to the serpent. Ares is related to the serpent. The Bible starts with a story about a serpent. All the great traditions have a serpent in the middle. That serpent is Samael. Here we see a picture of Ares. Ares in the Greek tradition is always depicted as a great warrior, as the god of war, the god of battles. And his symbol is a serpent. We see that on his shield. This particular image depicts him conquering a giant named Mimas. And you see the giant looks exactly like Ares, a mirror image. That's because Samael, Ares, is Lucifer. Is related to that force in this particular race, this particular age. We have the serpent above and the serpent below. We have the serpent of bronze that healed the Israelites under the guidance of Moses. And we have the fiery serpents that bit the Israelites when they sinned. These are the 2 serpents that can rise upon the staff. One that can go up or it can go down. It depends on how the energy is used. Samael, Ares, Lucifer, in other words, is an energy, a cosmic force. A force related with battles and warfare. And that energy descends from above into us, but is polarized according to our mind stream. This is why the Greeks loved and hated Ares. They loved him and they hated him. This is why the Hebrews hate Samael. But some of their scriptures, they love Samael. This is why in the Bible we find the stories of the serpent, where the serpent is always condemned, and yet Jesus said, "Be as wise as a serpent." We find this great duality, but that duality is a reflection of the nature of that energy in ourselves. You see, that serpent can either liberate us or enslave us. That serpent tempts Eve, causing humanity to fall from Eden into suffering. That serpent also raises on the staff and heals the people of God. The choice is ours. Depends on how we use this force, this energy. This image shows that Ares is the great warrior who can train us who can teach us how to conquer the ego. Ares is the 5th of the 7. Aries, Samael. The 7 angels, or the 7 planets, are represented in all of our great traditions also. It's important for us to know this science of the 7 planets. They influence us in many ways. Number 1, the moon. Number 2, Mercury. Number 3, Venus. Number 4 is the sun. Number 5 is Mars, Aries. 6 is Jupiter. And 7 is Saturn. When our inner being, when our monad first emerged from the absolute, that ray of light that came from our Ein Sof passed through a prism, a spiritual prism, related to these 7 planets. And these 7 planets gave as gifts to that ray of light their colors, qualities. All of us have this inside as an inheritance in our consciousness. And we experience them because we are alive. We all have them. These qualities are virtues or attributes that are modified according to our conditioning. The moon, which is the first planet, the first force in these 7, puts into our consciousness a quality or an energy, a psychological attribute related with the moon's own nature. The moon begins, the moon initiates, the moon creates. So the quality that the moon gives to us is altruism, generosity, to give to others, unselfish giving. But when our consciousness becomes modified through desire, when that serpent is polarized negatively in us, that altruism becomes avarice. It becomes greed. This is why in our mind stream now, we continually experience, I want. I want. Very rarely do we experience, I want to give. This is very rare. It may happen occasionally, but our conditioning has become so severe that most of the time we experience, I want for me. This is avarice. When we observe our mind stream on a day-to-day basis, this is what we can see. Don't believe me. Look at yourself. Start observing yourself. Don't fake it. Don't lie to yourself. Be honest. Watch your mind. And not in class when you're on your best behavior. Watch your mind at work. Watch your mind at home. Watch your mind when you're interacting with other people. And look for this quality. Mercury gives us a quality that we call diligence. Diligence is not merely physical activity. It is conscious activity. We have what we call consciousness. We all think right now that we're conscious, but we're not. We're asleep as a consciousness. That asleep state is laziness. Physically, you could be very active. You could be amazing everyone that you can ride a bike and chew gum and write an email at the same time. And I bet probably everybody here can do that. But that's not diligence. That's laziness. That's the ego. Ego can do that. Ego can do all kinds of stuff all at the same time. But our consciousness is asleep. The proof of that is evident throughout our life. We lack the connection with God. The consciousness is an extension of God. A diligent consciousness knows, has knowledge, real knowledge. That's gnosis. A diligent, awakened consciousness does not fear, doesn't get stressed out, doesn't get tense. But you know the most beautiful quality of an awakened consciousness? Peace. In the heart. But it's a peace that's not for oneself. It's a peace that expresses itself towards others. That radiates serenity and love. That is diligence, consciously. That diligence works for others. Gives, acts for others in many ways, but is not self-obsessed. Laziness is self-obsessed, even when it's hyperactivity. Whether you're lying on the couch all the time or you're working 26 hours every 24-hour day. There's a polarity there, but it's still laziness. Venus gives to our consciousness the quality of chastity. Chastity is sexual purity, not sexual abstention. Every creature in the universe is a sexual being in their level. Sexual energy is part of nature. It's normal. It's natural. It's needed. But lust is not. We don't see the difference. We don't understand the difference. Really, in all of these cases, what we think is altruism is usually avarice. And what we think is diligence is usually laziness. And what we think is chastity is usually lust. That's because these qualities cannot exist with the ego. They're oil and water. They cannot mix. Real chastity is sexual energy that belongs to God. You see the beauty in a flower? Have you actually contemplated that beauty? Have you sat and observed it and digested that beauty? Do it. Sit and observe it. Not in your imagination, but actually sit and do it. It's springtime now in North America, and this is a perfect time. Take a few minutes and go and look at a flower. That is chastity. The delicacy of it, the beauty of it, the magnificence of it, the incomprehensible nature of that flower is chastity. That's Venus. But let me tell you something. We as human organisms can blossom a flower of chastity that is 1 billion times more beautiful than any flower on this planet. But we don't find anyone like that because we're all trapped in lust. The sun gives us the quality of faith and humility. True humility and true faith are the greatest strength, the greatest armor, the greatest power. That's why the sun is in the middle. You see, of these 7 planets, there are 3 on either side, and the one in the middle is the sun. The sun gives life. What is it that gives you your spiritual life? Faith in God. Not God outside, your innermost. What is the opposite of that? Faith in oneself. Pride. Skepticism. That's what we have. When we hear about gnosis, we hear about God, we hear about transmutation and chastity, we hear about tantra, what do we have? skepticism, pride, self-love. We don't believe in that stuff. We don't have any evidence. We don't believe in God. We don't have any evidence. We only trust our senses. We trust sensations. We don't trust faith, real faith. The fifth is Mars. As I mentioned, Mars is the planet or the god of war. So traditionally, we always think about Mars as Ares, the god of war who loves bloodshed and battle. But that's when that force is polarized negatively in mankind. When that force is polarized positively in mankind, Mars is the force of love. What is the opposite of war? It is love. War is not an expression of love. It is a condemnation of it. So Mars, Ares, gives to us cognizant, selfless love. True love, real love, is Martian. It is Aryan. Sixth is Jupiter, who bestows upon every soul the capacity to be happy for other people. This is also very rare for us to experience because usually when someone we know wins the lottery or they get something really good, we say, oh, congratulations, I'm so happy for you. But in our hearts we think, oh, I wish it was me. That isn't happiness for others. That's envy. And that's why the opposite of happiness for others is envy. Real happiness for others has no self in it. It is a form of love that wants to give. And that's why we see so rarely a manifestation of that in the world. But if you observe our society, if you look at our advertising and our commercialism and everything that functions in our society, you can see that all of it is rooted in envy. I want what they have. The vast majority of this planet feels that way towards America. That's why people hate America. Or they love America. They want to go to America for decades, centuries. I want what they have. And then the Americans and the North Americans want what the celebrities have and the Wall Street executives. No one is happy with what they have. Who among us is content? Truly content. Truly with inner happiness for what we have. And then when we see someone else have something, that we're truly happy for them. We truly feel they really deserve that. I'm so glad they got that. I'm so happy for them. We don't. We have envy. Whoops. The seventh. Oh, I didn't put the seventh. The seventh is Saturn. Saturn gives us now my mind went totally blank because this thing is messed up. Yeah. Saturn gives us temperance, the seventh planet. Temperance is self-control, moderation. And this is the ability to be restrained, to be efficient, to not waste, to not take too much, to use what is needed and take nothing more. But we rarely see that. What we tend to see in ourselves is gluttony, which has different forms. We like to buy everything we can get our hands on and fill our closets with stuff we don't need. We eat too much. We shop too much. So we buy too much and we spend too much. We waste a lot and we hoard a lot. That is gluttony. So these 7 planets put into our consciousness their qualities. And they form a kind of psychological equilibrium in the very highest levels of our being, in our spirit. Our spirit descends into matter and manifests a soul, which is us, the essence. And that soul enters into matter and takes up bodies and begins to act and acquires consequences. And those 7 virtues become conditioned by the consequences of our actions. Where we should have acted with temperance, we acted with gluttony. And that quality becomes conditioned into gluttony. It becomes ego. And where we should have acted with love, we acted instead with resentment and anger. That quality from Mars becomes conditioned and polarized into anger. That's why we have wars. And that quality of happiness for others becomes conditioned into envy, into the desire to have what others have. And that's why we have strife. We have starvation. We have theft, stealing, lying. And that quality of gluttony is just the conditioning of that quality of temperance. And the quality of laziness is the conditioning of that quality of diligence. So in all of the different qualities that we can observe in ourselves on a daily basis, they are reflections of what should be superior qualities. This is the key. This is the clue. If you want to change, transmute your mind. When you catch in yourself that desire of lust, that wants to be fed, that wants to take in the sensations of looking at that other person or thinking about that person and imagining the lust or pursuing that lust, remember God, faith, and transform that energy. It's not easy to do. We can learn it by being trained by that great instructor of this age, who is Mars. But you see, Mars has a partner. When you look into the ancient mythology, you find that Ares is always chasing Aphrodite. If you've studied Greek mythology, you've heard these stories. That Ares loves Venus. Mars and Venus. And we've all heard the pop psychology about men are from Mars and women are from Venus and all that. And there's truth in that. But what's more true is that we have both aspects in our mind. We have both the Martian aspect and the Venusian aspect in our mind. When we work with them together, we can find the way to solve our problem. Mars brings us this quality, the ability to wage war. Mars is a fighter, a warrior, who gives to us a martial spirit. The ability to become a great warrior, a fighter, spiritually. We need that. But that ability has to be tempered with Venus. In order for those forces to work in harmony, in balance around the sun. What we see in these 7 planets then is a great alchemical mystery that's very beautiful and very long hidden. A relationship between these planets and how they function in our psyche and the key that they give us to transform our life. You see, Saturn, the last planet, is the planet of death. Old man time, they say. Whereas the moon, the first, is the one that brings conception and is born anew. So we see at the beginning, the moon is the beginning of life, and the end, Saturn, is the end of life. But through the process of transmutation, all that is old in us, all that is dying and decaying in us, our ego, has to die. And through that transmutation, we bring the moon. New birth, new life. This is not a theory. This is something that happens in your psyche through the process of alchemy. Furthermore, Jupiter represents our innermost being, our inner Buddha, the king, the warrior, King Arthur in our consciousness, who through alchemy, through transmutation, become transformed into Mercury. And Mercury is the great secret of alchemy. Mercury is that substance which allows alchemy to be possible. It is that which empowers transmutation. That Mercury is the force in our sexual organs that becomes modified by our will and either rises or falls in accordance with our actions. Mars, the warrior who loves bloodshed, when he is negatively conditioned and creates war and conflict and problems such as we all have, both inside and outside, through the magical process of alchemy, becomes transformed into the planet of love, into Venus, and is balanced and harmonized. And in the center of it all is the sun. The planet that balances and that creates harmony in the law. And that truth is evidenced here in these ancient images of Ares riding in his chariot drawn by 4 horses. One of them is not shown in this picture, but there are 4 horses. Ares with his wife Aphrodite by his side. This is Mars and Venus. And that little creature riding on the horse is Eros, sex. Here we have it represented in the Greek mysteries, the Gnostic key. It's a key that has to be implemented not only in our relationships, but inside of our psyche. In this image, we see the gods waging war against the giants. The gods represent those cosmic forces that descend from above into our psyche that will fight on our behalf against the giants, which is our ego, our karma. But we have to do our part. We have to have faith in God. We have to know how to receive that training. So what happens is Ares teaches us how to fight. When Ares is tempered by Venus, in other words, when that martial spirit is balanced by Venus, the force of love, then we can take the training of Ares and learn how to be spiritual warriors. And that's in many levels. That's why we've been talking about spiritual defense, what the tools are, mantras and prayers, but the main thing is the psychological attitude. You see, when you study the Gnostic tradition, you're given many tools. They're armaments, really, weapons. Those armaments and weapons are in many forms. The books are full of knowledge, full of weapons. The mantras, the prayers, the practices are all weapons. And through using them, you develop your own inner weapons and tools on the forge of alchemy. In that forge, you begin to create the soul, to create vessels for that soul to inhabit, which are great armaments and great weapons that we need in the battle. But let's make something very clear. We need the solar bodies. We need the bodies of the spirit. We need the bodies of the logos. We need to develop all of those vessels up the entire tree of life. But they are useless if we have a bad attitude. In fact, they become dangerous. You see, the armor is no good if the warrior has no training. If someone gives to us the most precious suit of magical armor that exists, but we don't know how to use it, it's useless. If someone comes and gives to us a powerful sword, beautiful, glittering, but we're an immature child, we will hurt ourselves. We will cut ourselves. We could kill ourselves. Or worse, someone else. That is why, as I mentioned, traditionally the teachings were given in graded stages. Now there's no more time. What you find in this teaching, in this tradition, are very powerful tools. And you can easily destroy yourself with them. I've witnessed it. I'm praying I don't do it to myself, because I'm an idiot. It's easy to do. A weapon is dangerous. You need training to know how to use it properly. The fundamental, most important training is psychological. To learn from your own inner Aries, your own innermost, your own being, how to be a warrior for him. In the ancient myths, your being is represented by King Arthur. And your human soul is represented by Lancelot, the knight. And your consciousness, Deborah, is represented by Guinevere. And you as a human soul have to learn to fight on the battlefield against the dragon, against the evil knights, against all those forces that are in your own mind for the glory of your maiden and your king. That's the battle we have to wage. So that training is to learn how to transmute those 7 vices into virtues. It is a psychological warfare. Very difficult. The training that we have to undergo is rigorous and takes a long process. If you think it's easy to overcome anger and make it into love, you need to face reality. If you think it's easy to overcome lust and transform it into chastity, you need to sit down and think this through more thoroughly. It is not easy. It's not something you can do part-time. If you think that you can do 10 minutes of meditation a day or an hour a week and maybe read a couple of articles or go to a school every once in a while or go meditate every once in a while, that you'll get somewhere, you won't. I promise you. To accomplish this requires everything you have. No matter what it is that you try to withhold, to keep for yourself, to say, well, I'll give everything in my life over to my spiritual practice. I'll do it with everything. I'll put everything into myself into it, except watching movies. I really want to be able to watch movies. Or you say, well, everything in my life, I'll do it spiritually except in the bedroom. Or you think, everything in my life I'll give to God, and I'll be spiritual and mindful except when I go to work, except when I'm trying to make money. Then I just have to concentrate on that. I'm sorry, but you're lying to yourself. You're condemning yourself. Goliath is winning. So the first thing that the warrior has to do is to find those weaknesses. A man once told me, when you begin martial training, The student comes in and believes that they have certain qualities and values already. They think, I've got a really good left hook, or I'm really good at shooting a rifle, or I'm really good at this particular technique. An instructor said, that is their greatest weakness. A true warrior has to have every skill equal. If you train in martial arts, for example, and you come in thinking, I'm going to become an expert at kicking, a good teacher will never let you kick. They will force you to learn punches and to learn evasion, learn other tools, because they want you to develop those parts of you that you've always ignored. And you'll find the same in the Gnostic tradition. A good teacher will push you to develop the things that you don't want to deal with, because those are the places where you're most vulnerable. But you have to train yourself now. You have to listen to God. Only your innermost knows you inside and out. The trainer he sends you is Lucifer, a reflection of Samael Ares in your mind stream. Lucifer is also called Mephistopheles. He is the one who comes and says to God, I see your devotee Job loves you very much when everything in his life is good, but will he love you so much if I take everything away from him? Will he still be faithful? And God says, test him. Let's find out. But don't touch his body. Take everything else, but leave his body alone. So Lucifer does that to us. Lucifer comes and says, oh yeah, you think you're a big shot Gnostic? Well, what if I make your computer not work today? Are you really so spiritual that you're going to maintain your serenity when you can't get your email? No, we lose our minds over stupid things. Are you really going to be so serene when I keep you from that meal for an extra hour or two and you can't eat and you get really mad? Or when I give you this problem with your spouse where they accuse you of this and that? Or your friends, when they accuse you of this and that, or they all think, oh, he's doing something really bad. He's left the path. Will you maintain your serenity and your faith in God? Or what if Lucifer gets permission from God to touch your body too? To give you an illness? To give you a sickness? To make you look like a fool in front of the whole world? Will you still maintain your faith and serenity in God? What if he comes and takes your spouse away? What if he takes the life of your spouse? Can you maintain your serenity? Can you maintain your faith in God? This is our trainer, and he will do it all to you. It's only a matter of time. Don't believe for an instant in the ego's idea that now that you're on the path, everything's going to be golden from here on out, and you're on a path of eternal happiness. The path is not like that. The real path is a path of bitterness and fights, and it is painful. Because to come out the other side, to emerge from this life as a conscious, awakened being, all that is impure in us has to die. And that process of death is not pleasant. And that process of death happens every day. It sounds grim, but war is grim. War is not easy. Spiritual war is the hardest. It's harder than a physical war. But let me give you something that can help you. You see, David won. Do you realize that? David was a little kid with nothing. And he stepped onto that battlefield and faced the greatest warrior of his age a giant who was totally armored and had a lifetime of killing. And David just went out there and said, I have faith in God, and that is enough. And he won. That is all you need. You need the tools and techniques. You need to learn to meditate, to transmute, to observe yourself, to sacrifice for others. These three factors must be practiced daily. But more than that, to support that, to strengthen that, you need the right attitude, the right state. Samael and Vior told us very clearly, the best defense, the best weapon is the correct psychological state. Period. And you may not realize it now, but if you really work seriously with this science, you will come to realize it, that you always have a choice. In every situation that you face, no matter how difficult, no matter how painful, no matter how subtle, it is up to you to feel how you feel. It is up to you to act how you act. It is up to you to think how you think. So when you feel the burden, that heavy psychological weight of your mind giving you trouble, your heart giving you trouble, your body giving you trouble, take a hold of yourself and generate the right state. And the shortcut, the magical tool to do that, is to remember your innermost, to call upon God. The single most powerful tool for that is the Lord's Prayer. When you face moments of temptation, great trial, when you really feel like you're going to die or you're going to kill somebody, pray that with all of your heart. Pray the Our Father. Call upon your innermost. Let go of everything. Like David on that battlefield, alone, nearly naked, with nothing but having faith in God. And you'll realize how much power you actually have. Now, what this emphasizes for me is a misunderstanding in many esoteric traditions that emphasize that the students absolutely must learn certain techniques, or absolutely must develop solar bodies, or absolutely must belong to certain groups, or this and that, in order to succeed. And if you don't have those things, you're going to fall from the path. You won't become a Buddha. That's actually a lie. Yeah, we need those things, but you can actually succeed without them. You can achieve great heights of spiritual development without solar bodies. You can't go all the way, but you can go a long way. You can achieve great heights without such and such a school or such and such a master. They might help you, but they can't stop you if you don't have them. And there are many prayers and mantras. You don't need to know all of them. The main thing you need is the right psychological attitude. To awaken your consciousness, to have faith in God, to work with your energies. That will take you. You see, this emphasizes the point that even if someone has the solar bodies, if they have a bad attitude, they're going to go to hell. In other words, if they use those tools in the wrong way, they're doomed. Someone can have the solar bodies, someone can reach great levels of initiation, but if their pride takes a hold of them, or if their gluttony or their greed or their envy takes a hold of them, they will fall. So what good are the solar bodies? Conversely, if you really master and learn bodhicitta, true compassion and love for others, true serenity in the mind, you can easily surpass those people with solar bodies. You can go a long way. And then later you can develop those other tools. It is our inner attitude that makes the most difference. The point here is, don't think you have to have a spouse to advance in this teaching. Don't think you have to have a school or second chamber to advance in this teaching. Don't think you have to have the astral body to succeed in this teaching. They're useful, but the main thing you need to advance in this teaching is a relationship with your innermost and the right attitude. The most important. So there's a prayer I'll read you that comes from around the 7th century BC. So it's almost 3,000 years old. And this is a prayer from the Greeks to Samael, to that force. And the prayer reads like this. Ares, exceeding in strength, chariot-rider, golden-helmed, doughty in heart, shield-bearer, Saviour of cities, harnessed in bronze, strong of arm, unwearying, mighty with the spear, O defender of Olympos, father of warlike victory, ally of Themis, stern governor of the rebellious, leader of the righteous men, sceptred king of manliness, who whirl your fiery sphere among the planets in their sevenfold courses throughout the aither, wherein your blazing steeds ever bear you above the third firmament of heaven. Hear me, helper of men, giver of dauntless youth. Shed down a kindly ray from above upon my life and strength of war, that I may be able to drive away bitter cowardice from my head and crush down the deceitful impulses of my soul. Restrain also the keen fury of my heart, which provokes me to tread the ways of blood-curdling strife. Rather, O Blessed One, give you me boldness to abide within the harmless laws of peace, avoiding strife and hatred and the violent fiends of death. So you see in that prayer how beautiful it is and how it illustrates everything in this lecture. And what I want to point out specifically is that the prayer calls Mars the ally of Themis. Themis is the name of a Greek goddess, is a symbol. Themis is Ma'at of the Egyptians, who is the goddess of justice, the law, karma. And Ares is the father of Nike, victory. So Ares, as you also can see in this, is the Greeks are praying, please give me the ability to not be warlike. Right? To be serene. To be a champion of love. That is really the Gnostic goal. Be warned that working with this force is very powerful, very effective. These forces are inside of your own psyche, and they can render great changes in your life if you work with them in an effective way. But if you stay asleep and you call upon these forces of Samael and begin to work with these forces of Samael, you will bring more anger and hate. Simple. This is why we can see in the Gnostic movements, different names, the spreading of anger and hate. Because they take those forces and they don't work with them in the positive way. Those forces polarize negatively because of the ego. And we see a spreading of anger and hate, of warfare, of fighting. Really, it's absurd to see fighting among religions. It is absurd. And there's only one person to blame, and that is us. So to change that, we have to change ourselves. Anyhow, the main thing I wanted to talk about was this, that how to defend ourselves spiritually begins inside of our mind. And the training we need, we can receive inside of our mind. To look and observe ourselves from day to day and learn how to change. So I'll give you a challenge. A friend of mine told me a great idea. And I love this, so I'm going to share it with you and hope that you'll use it. For the next week, don't complain. Yeah, you laugh, right? Because you realize how impossible it is. Okay, so I'll make it a little easier. Find a partner. Maybe your spouse, maybe coworkers, maybe more than one. And tell them, if you hear me complain, I have to give you $1. If you hear me criticize, I have to give you $1. And if you don't want to do it that way, then make a piggy bank, and any time that you catch yourself criticizing or complaining, whether with your mouth or your mind, donate that dollar to a good cause. See how quickly you overcome that habit. You may not realize how much you complain and how much you criticize others. But your complaining and your criticizing is a symptom of a lack of inner peace. Did you know that? If you want inner peace, then deal with the symptom. Go right to the cause. The cause is in your mind. But you can't see the cause until you see the symptom. So this technique is a really excellent way to start to recognize the symptom in yourself of disharmony in your mind, unhappiness, dis-ease. Everybody's laughing and smiling, right? Because you're like, oh man, I can't do that. That's impossible. I'm going to be broke in 2 days. Well, actually, you'll be broke in 1 day. It won't take 2 days. So try that. And be sincere. And I'm sure whatever group or not a good cause you decide to donate your money to will be very happy that you're being so honest with yourself. Do you have any questions?
We know that each of these planets are related with one of the days of the week. Is there a practical exercise that we can all use to make it practical, like Monday working altruism or avarice, or maybe that's not the right way to do it?
Well, the influence of the planets is a continual influence that affects us on many levels. Psychologically, those influences are with us all the time. And everything that we do, everything we see in our mind stream is related with planetary influences. When you feel resentment or hate, that's Mars. When you feel, lust, that's Venus, but polarized negative. Additionally, the days of the week are related with the planets, and there are additional influences there, and also the hours of the day. But I think that can get too complicated, and I think that at this stage it's better to work inside and try to look for the things inside of ourselves rather than trying to impose an external practice over it. Does that make sense? Because then you can become distracted by, what is today really, and what is the planet? And I think it's better just to keep looking. You can do that. And in the astrology books by Samael and also that new poster, that information is there. And it can guide you, right? But I think it's better to keep focused. In the back?
Yeah, we have two questions back here. How much influence does the inner Goliath have to influence other people and people's actions? Does this work through others' ignorance, ego, unconsciousness, in a collective network like Carl Jung's collective unconsciousness?
The question is, how much influence does our inner Goliath have over, how much influence does it have over others? And is the collective whole of all those inner Goliaths make up that collective unconscious of Jung? Yes, it's the same thing. Our inner Goliath makes up the vast majority of what we think of as ourselves. And we're constantly interacting with other people. So what is it in us that's interacting with others? It's our Goliath. This is rather obvious. But what we don't realize is that that huge percentage of our consciousness that's trapped in ego is active all the time, but without our awareness. That's scary. I've heard students say that when they come to study Gnosis and they hear some of the concepts that it scares them. And they get scared. Well, I'm scared to get out of my body. Or I'm scared to meditate. And that astonishes me. I understand that because I felt that too. But it astonishes me because my answer to that is, it's more scary not to know. Isn't it? If you're in a room and you know there's something bad in the closet, like when you were a kid, you knew there was a monster in the closet, but you didn't know what it was, but it scared you, right? Terrified. You couldn't sleep. Or under the bed. Mine was under the bed. Actually, I had both, under the bed and in the closet. So I was too scared to do anything. But when I was brave enough to go and look, I saw there was nothing there. The fear went away. That fear was self-generated. Your fear of meditation, your fear of getting out of your body is self-generated. So, yes, our ego definitely affects everyone around us and everything around us all the time. But it's more scary that we're not aware of that. That's a scary idea, right? That, oh yeah, our ego's affecting other things, we don't see it. But it's even more scary that we don't see it. Another question back there?
For somebody who is new on the path, do we still have time to make a real change in our lives?
Do we still have time if we're new in this work? Absolutely. These teachings come from our most ancient roots, and they're being given to us out of compassion because we do have a chance. You know, you don't give medicine, you don't give treatment to someone who's just about to die. You let them die, right? We're getting medicine, we're getting treatment, we're getting the medicine to cure our ills because there is a chance for us. But it's not a medicine that we can just lie back on the bed and wait. It doesn't work like that. This medicine requires our participation. Very rigorous, demanding, very powerful work that we have to do. If we do it, we have hope. And that's what drives us to keep teaching. That's what drives all the teachers who are teaching to teach. That's what drove Samael and Vior to type his book so much that he couldn't use his fingers anymore at the end of his life. He ruined his fingers from typing. Out of compassion for us, because he knew there was a chance for us. And this is why there are so many advocates who are fighting on our behalf. Because there is a chance. That is why your being is working on your behalf. If you're hearing these lectures, if you have access to this teaching, it's because you have a chance. And the ones that don't have access are lost. It sounds harsh, but it's evidential. It's clear. We have a chance. There is hope. But that hope is inside. It's said that if you take a step towards God, he'll take 1,000 steps towards you. It's absolutely true. So let's make those steps. Any other questions?
Yeah, you talked about, this might be a loaded question, but with the lifetimes and sort of psychologically, and then the last one was sexual magic. Now, I don't know if that's, how do we know, since we're trying to do this in one lifetime, how do we know when we're ready for this sexual magic?
It's a great question. Yeah, I talked about how over the course of the ages, the teachings were broken up into levels that we would enter into according to our own abilities. And that the last thing we would learn would be the transmutation, sexual magic. So now there's no more time to wait. That's why we're given the whole teaching as a whole, right? Now students anywhere in the world can learn about all of the mysteries of sexual transmutation and learn those practices. But how do you know you're ready? You are. Simple as that. Some say humanity's not prepared. Some say these teachings have to be withheld because humanity is not ready. That is a very Piscean way of thinking. That way of thinking belongs to the past age, which is ended. In the Piscean era, humanity was not prepared. But the Piscean era was the time within which humanity was being prepared. That time has ended. Humanity is ready. Your personality might not be ready. Your personality might have problems and conflicts. But the soul of humanity, that wave, the whole human race is ready. And that's why Samael and Vior initiated that age, the new age, and gave the teachings publicly, and wrote his books publicly, and gave the knowledge publicly, because humanity needs it now. People who withhold that knowledge or keep it from themselves are committing a crime. A crime against the soul, a crime against the being. When the being leads a soul to that teaching, it's because that soul needs it. And if someone stands in the way of that transmission, they commit a grave crime against that soul. A terrible crime. Those teachings are here now because we need them. We have to give them with clarity and with expertise. And this is why Samael explained in his books, the teachings of the ninth sphere have to be taught through Kabbalah so that it can make sense to people. They have to be taught scientifically, with comprehensive knowledge of all the religions, openly and clearly, which is how he taught it. And we have to follow that example and teach in the same way. Moreover, when we hear it, we have to start learning it and understanding it and practicing it to whatever level and wherever we are in our life. If we're a single person, we practice as a single person. There is absolutely no reason for anyone to continue with their old habits of fornication. Those who do that are enslaved by their own inner Satan. Simple as that. And those who encourage others to do that are also enslaved by their inner Satan. There is never an excuse to say, that person's not ready for sexual magic, let them continue fornicating. How can you say that? How can anyone say that? How can you condemn that soul to that suffering? And people do it. So when that teaching is given to us, it's because we need it. And that is the age that we're in now. These teachings have been taught publicly for 60 years now. 60 years, 6 decades they've been in the public sphere. And still there are people who say, oh, we're not ready. Humanity is not ready. I'm sorry. I humbly disagree. Any other questions? I don't mean to get so, intense at you, but...
Yeah, no, I expect you to act like that. I was just curious for mine.
We're ready. We may not like it. We may not want it, right? Because our desires clearly have other interests, right? But if that teaching is there, we need it. That is the teaching that will revolutionize your spiritual life. And if you avoid that teaching, it's your choice, right? Anybody can choose that. Everyone has the right to choose what they want in their life. Simple. But without transmutation, without sexual magic, they will have nothing. Nothing but the same. Nothing but suffering. The same old track. Any other questions? Yes?
That same line, when you're brought to begin the higher practices of tantrism, and you're working with your partner, and they're not quite, going along with it, how do you develop yourself knowing that, as you said earlier, it could damage you, it could ruin you? If this person's not into it, this is your spouse, they're not working psychologically, or they're not working, trying to do the same thing you're doing. How can you...
Yeah, well, how do you manage it when your spouse doesn't cooperate?
And not for yourself, too, but...
Of course. Of course. No change is coming overnight. Like I said before, we can't switch from lust to chastity immediately. It doesn't happen like that. It's a long fight. If your partner doesn't agree with these teachings and doesn't agree with the practices, accept it. It's your karma. Moreover, you have to respect their will, respect them, and love them. They're your spouse. They're your partner. It's hard. There's no question about that. But it's also a test of faith. It's a test of will. It's Lucifer getting you right in your heart, right? That's a very strong challenge. One that you have to face. There's no avoiding it. If that's your situation, deal with it. Don't just reject your spouse saying, oh, they're not supporting me, I have to leave them. Nowhere in the teachings does it allow that. Jesus strictly said, no, you cannot do that. Right? And Paul said that. These are great beings that we have to follow their guidance. Paul said, you know not, you may save your spouse. If they leave you, that's another thing. If they leave, it's their will. They can do that. You should still fight to save your relationship. Right? So how do you get through it? Day by day. With faith. You do your best. It may be, like Samael and Vior told us, that you may have to practice in secret. You may have to act like you're not practicing in order to calm the ego of your spouse. Right? You might have to fake. It can be done. It's not easy, but it can be done. Should you do that? I don't know. That's something you have to find yourself. This is the other thing. Every person enters this work and will face the steps of the path in accordance with their own karma. We can't compare, really. Everyone's going to face their own situations, their own recurrences, their own ex-spouses, their own mistakes, and have to deal with them in the way that their being guides them to do it. None of us have the right to judge anyone else. And when we give advice, we have to give it with a great deal of caution. So in your case, try to listen to what your being tells you. Or if someone here is facing that challenge, listen to your being. Don't rush. Be patient, wait, and listen. God always gives us the guidance, but sometimes he makes us wait a little while. Right? But it's always there. Was there another question? Somebody? No? Okay, thank you.
The presentation of this lecture was made possible by donations from listeners like you. Help Gnostic Radio to help others. Make a donation by visiting gnosticradio.org. For questions and deeper understanding of this lecture, we invite you to explore the wide variety of resources available on our websites. Thank you for your support. May all beings be happy.